Welcome back to Guitar Theory Modules. This is Module 14, and we're on pages 45 through 47. In this module, you're going to learn about triad inversions. You learned how to write major triads in Module 12. We're going to build on that in this module, so don't start this module until you're sure you understand how to write major triads in closed and open voicings. As you learned in Module 12, the root is the note the chord is built on. Now, when the root is the lowest sounding note of the chord, that chord is in root position. You can also invert a chord so that either the third or the fifth is the lowest sounding note. You can invert a chord by moving the root or the third or both at least an octave higher, leaving one of the non-root notes at the bottom of the chord. Here's a C major chord in root position. From bottom to top, we have a root, third, and a fifth. And in root position, the root is the lowest sounding note of the chord. Here's another C chord. This one is in first inversion. In first inversion, the root is moved up at least one octave, leaving the third as the lowest sounding note of the chord. And we can see in the chord right there, we have from bottom to top, the third, the fifth, and then the root. This third chord is also a C chord. This one is in second inversion. So in second inversion, the root and third are both moved up at least an octave, and the fifth is left as the lowest note of the chord. We can see from bottom to top, we have a fifth, then a root, and a third. So when the root is the lowest note of the chord, it's in root position. When the third is the lowest note of the chord, it's in first inversion. And when the fifth is the lowest note of the chord, it's in second inversion. And this holds true for both closed and open-voiced chords. Here's an open-voice C major chord. This one is in root position because the C, the root of the chord, is the lowest sounding note. We have a root, then a fifth, then a third. Here's another open-voice C major chord. This one's in first inversion because the third, the E, is the lowest sounding note. And here's another open voice C major. This one's in second inversion because the fifth is the lowest sounding note. We have a fifth, third, and then a root. It doesn't matter how many notes you add to the chord, the bottom note is what determines whether it's in root position, first inversion, or second inversion. Here's a C chord with a whole bunch of C's, E's, and G's. The bottom note is a C, which is the root of the chord, so it's in root position. Here's another C chord with a whole bunch of C's, E's, and G's. The bottom note is the third of the chord, that E, so that'll be in first inversion. And our third example is in second inversion. Again, a whole bunch of C's, E's, and G's, but the fifth of the chord, the G, is the lowest sounding note, so that makes it second inversion. To identify an inverted triad and figure out which note is the root, which is the third, and which is the fifth, move some of the notes up or down an octave until they're all neatly stacked in thirds within an octave. And if any of the notes are doubled an octave higher, just eliminate the higher notes until you have a three-note triad. From bottom to top, we have an F sharp, an A, and a D. I can take that highest note, the D, move it down an octave, and now all the notes are within an octave, all stacked in thirds. From there, you can figure out that this is a D major chord, originally shown in first inversion because the third, the F sharp, is the lowest note of that chord. From bottom to top, we now have an F, a B flat, and a D. I can move that upper B flat and D down an octave, so those notes are stacked up in thirds. And then you can figure out from there, it's a B-flat major chord. Originally, this is in second inversion because the F, the fifth of the chord, is the lowest sounding note of the chord. In the second measure, I've taken that F and moved it up an octave instead of moving the B-flat and the D down an octave. But the result is the same. You can still figure out it's a B-flat major chord, and that the first way of writing it is in second inversion with the fifth of the chord at the bottom. In this example, we have a D, G, B, D, and a G, so we have some note doubling here. The first thing I did was to take out some of those doubled notes, so I crossed out the higher G and the higher D, and we're left with, from bottom to top, a D, a G, and a B. From there, we can take the D at the bottom of the staff, move it up an octave. Now all those notes are neatly stacked in thirds, G, B, D, and this is a G major chord. Originally, this chord is in second inversion because the D, the fifth of the chord, is the lowest sounding note. At the bottom of page 46, we have this major triad inversion exercise 1. So your job is to name each major triad and rewrite it in first inversion and second inversion. Remember that for the first inversion, all you have to do is raise the root an octave higher, leaving the third at the bottom of the chord. And for second inversion, you raise the root and the third an octave higher, leaving the fifth at the bottom of the chord. If you have my book, Guitar Theory Modules, you can write your answers right there in the book. If you don't have my book, you're going to need some manuscript paper. I have some free manuscript paper you can download from my website. I'll leave a link in the description. If you have my book, you can check your answers on page 214. But we're going to go over the answers in just a minute, so pause the video, write your answers, start the videos, and check your answers. Number 1 is an F major chord. To change it to first inversion, raise the F an octave higher, so now you're looking at, from the bottom to top, A, C, and F. To change it to second inversion, you can now take that A from the first inversion, raise it an octave, and now you have C, F, and A. Number 2, an A major chord. To change it to first inversion, take the root of the chord, that A, move it up an octave, and now you should be looking at C sharp, E, A. To change that first inversion chord into second inversion, raise the C sharp an octave, leaving the fifth in the bass. Now we have an E, A, C sharp. Number 3 is a G major chord. To change it to first inversion, take the root of the chord, that low G, raise it an octave higher. That leaves the third in the bass, and first inversion should read B, D, G. To change that first inversion chord to a second inversion chord, you can raise the B an octave. That leaves the D in the bass, or as the lowest note. Now we're looking at D, G, and B. Number 4 is a B flat major chord. To change it to first inversion, take that B flat, the root of the chord, raise it an octave higher. That leaves the third in the bass, or as the lowest note. You should have D, F, B flat. To change that first inversion B flat to a second inversion, take the D, raise that an octave higher. That leaves the F in the bass, that's the fifth of the chord, and you're looking at F, B flat, D. Number 5 is an E flat major chord. To change this E flat chord into a first inversion E flat chord, raise the low E flat an octave higher. Now the third of the chord, the G, is in the bass, or the lowest sounding note, and it's in first inversion. To change this first inversion chord to second inversion, raise that third of the chord, the G, an octave higher. That leaves a B flat in the bass, or as the lowest sounding note. The B flat is the fifth of the chord, so it's second inversion, B flat, E flat, G. Number 6 is an E major chord. To change this root position E into a first inversion E, raise the E, the root of the chord, an octave higher. That leaves the G sharp, the third of the chord, as the lowest sounding note. So you should be looking at G sharp, B, E. To change that first inversion E to second inversion, raise the G sharp an octave higher. That leaves the B in the bass, or as the lowest sounding note. The B is the fifth of the chord, so we're in second inversion. You should be looking at B, E, G sharp. Number 7 is a B major chord. To change this to a first inversion B major chord, raise the B, the root of the chord, an octave higher. That leaves the D sharp, the third of the chord, at the bottom of the chord, so we're in first inversion. We have D sharp, F sharp, B. To change this to second inversion, Take the D sharp and raise it an octave higher. Now we have an F sharp in the bass, or as a lowest sounding note. We're in second inversion because that F sharp is the fifth of the chord. You should be looking at F sharp, B, D sharp. And number 8. D flat major is your chord. To change this to a first inversion D flat, take the D flat, raise it an octave. Now we have an F in the bass, or as the lowest sounding note. The F is the third of the chord, so we're in first inversion. You should be looking at F, A flat, D flat. To change this first inversion into a second inversion chord, raise the F an octave higher. Now we have an A flat as the lowest note. A flat is the fifth of a D flat chord, so we're in second inversion. You should be looking at A flat, D flat, F. On page 47, we have this major triad inversion exercise 2. So your job is to write the name of each major chord above the staff and label each chord as first or second inversion. Then rewrite each chord in root position and stack all those notes up in thirds. Now you might find it easier to reposition the notes first and then go back and label the chord. Some of these chords are written in open voicings. When you find an open voice chord, move those notes around until they're all stacked in thirds within an octave. You'll also find some doubled notes in here, and when you do, just eliminate one of the doubled notes, and then from there move the notes around so everything is within an octave stacked in thirds. If you have guitar theory modules, you can write your answers right there in the book, and you can check your work on page 214. And if you don't have guitar theory modules and need some manuscript paper to write on, don't forget I've got that free manuscript paper on my website, and the link is in the description. We're going to go through these answers now, so pause the video, write your answers, start the video, and check your work. As we go through these answers, I'm going to rearrange the chord first, and then we'll identify the original chord and the inversion. Number 1. I've taken the upper G, moved it down an octave. Now those notes are neatly stacked in thirds, G, B, D. So the original chord is G in first inversion because the B, the third of the chord, is in the bass, or the lowest sounding note of the chord. Number 2, this is an open voicing, so I've taken the upper note, the F, and moved it down an octave, and I've taken the lowest note, the C, and moved it up an octave. Now everything's nice and neatly stacked in thirds, F, A, C. So this is an F chord, originally in second inversion because the C, the fifth of the chord, is the lowest note. Number 3, we have a doubled note. We have an F at the bottom and an F at the top. If I eliminate the F at the bottom, I'm left with B flat, D, F, nice and neatly stacked on top of each other. So this is a B flat major chord, originally in second inversion because the F, the fifth of the chord, was in the bass. Number 4, I've taken the A at the top and moved it down an octave. Everything is nice and neatly stacked, A, C sharp, E. So this is an A major chord, originally in first inversion because the C sharp, the third of the chord, is the lowest note of the chord. Number 5, we have more than 3 notes, so you know there's going to be some note doubling. The upper 2 notes, the D and the F sharp, can be taken away because they also appear an octave lower. From there, I can take the low A, raise it an octave, and now we have a D, F sharp, and an A stacked nice and neatly on top of each other. This is a D major chord. Originally, it's in second inversion because the fifth of the chord, the A, appears at the bottom of the chord. Number 6, I can take the E flat at the top, lower it in an octave, and now those notes are stacked in thirds, E flat, G, B flat. So this is an E flat major chord, originally in first inversion because the G, the third of the chord, is at the bottom of the chord. Number 7, I can take the A flat at the top, lower it 1 octave. Now everything is nice and neatly stacked in thirds, A flat, C, E flat. This is originally an A flat major chord in first inversion because the third of the chord, the C, is at the bottom of the chord. Number 8 is an open-voiced chord. So I'm going to take the upper D flat, move it down an octave. I'll take the lower A flat, move it up an octave. Now everything is nice and neatly stacked in thirds, D flat, F, A flat. This is a D flat major chord, originally in second inversion because the fifth of the chord, the A flat, is in the bass, or the lowest sounding note. Number 9 is an open-voiced chord. I don't have to move too many notes around. As a matter of fact, I just need to move that low C sharp up between the A and the E. So now I have an A, C sharp, E, all stacked in thirds. This is an A major chord, originally in first inversion because the third of the chord, the C sharp, is the lowest sounding note of the chord. Number 10 has more than 3 notes, so you know there's going to be some note doubling. I can eliminate the E and the G from the bottom of the chord, and now I'm left with C, E, G, all stacked in thirds. This is a C major chord, originally in first inversion because the E, the third of the chord, is the lowest note of the chord. Number 11, I can take the G flat at the top, move it down an octave. Now everything's nice and neatly stacked together with G flat, B flat, D flat. This is a G flat major chord, originally in first inversion because the B flat, which is the third of the chord, is at the bottom of that chord. Number 12, I can take the F sharp at the bottom, raise it an octave. Now I have a nice neat B, D sharp, and F sharp all stacked up on top of each other. This is a B major chord, originally in second inversion because the fifth of the chord, the F sharp, is the lowest note of the chord. Your assignment for this module is to practice writing major triads and inversions, so download that free manuscript paper from my website and print as much as you need. To practice writing out your major triads and inversions, pick a few notes a day. I suggest sticking with natural and flat notes. If you pick sharp notes, you're going to end up with some double sharps, and we haven't talked about that yet. So write your triads in root position, and then write them in first inversion and second inversion the way you did on page 46. You're going to end up repeating chords, but this is a good thing. As long as you play guitar, you're going to see these chords over and over again. So the more time you spend writing out triads and inversions, the more familiar you're going to be with chords and how all this theory stuff works. Now, if you haven't quite got your head wrapped around the material in Module 12, this module is going to be difficult for you. So if you need to, go back and review Module 12. Some of these concepts take time, and there's nothing wrong with going back and repeating older material, especially when it's as important as the information in Module 12. Don't forget to check out my book, Guitar Theory Modules. You can watch all my videos for free, but if you have Guitar Theory Modules, you're going to have all this information in one place. It's going to be a lot easier to follow along. So I'll leave a link in the description. That's all for now. Take your time with this module, and when you're ready, I will see you in Module 15, where you're going to learn how to construct minor triads.